A lush forest stream stalked by a vengeful spirit, aged desert ruins harboring ghosts of the past, and a historic hotel where guests check in but never really check out await on this list of some of the most haunted places in Arizona. Let's jump right in. Hey guys, and thanks for joining me on this journey through some of the most haunted places in the Copper State of Arizona. Famous for its ghost towns, natural wonders, historic landmarks, and more, Arizona is also quite infamous for ancient legends as old as mankind itself, and ghost stories sure to send shivers down the spines of even the bravest explorers. Are you sure you're ready to get started? Our first haunt has us traveling to the southeastern corner of Arizona to the iconic Gadon Hotel. The Gadon Hotel, which is located in Douglas, Arizona, is a prominent historic lodging that towers over its surrounding small township that's bound to have grown in fame for its luxurious accommodations and in infamy due to purported ghostly activity experienced within. Historically, this hotel, which was designed by El Paso architect Henry Trost, would first open its doors in 1907 and was named after the Gadsden Purchase, in which nearly 30,000 square miles of southern Arizona and southwestern New Mexico were acquired by the U.S. from Mexico. Through its earliest days, the Gadsden would earn a reputation as a home away from home for local ranchers, cattlemen, miners, and entrepreneurs, and would act as a popular spot in which various parties would come to socialize, drink, and conduct business. Sadly, however, on February 7th of 1928, the beloved lodging would be leveled by a massive fire, which left only the elevator car cabin, marble staircase, and columns standing. However, shortly after the blaze, Trost would step back up to recreate the hotel he'd originally imagined, and the site would welcome a reconstruction that would last into the following year. More recently, on July 30th of 1976, the Gadsden was welcomed into the National Register of Historic Places, all but ensuring its ongoing preservation for future generations to come. Oh, and as some fun side trivia, the hotel's electric lift is actually one of the oldest manually operated elevators still in use west of the Mississippi. The site was one of the earliest lodgings to boast individual restrooms in all 160 of its rooms, and its 1929 telephone switchboard, which now resides in the museum, is revered as the oldest of its kind to be used in the state. In 2013, the Gadsden was featured on the popular show Hotel Impossible and would welcome a slew of renovations and modernizations. In the present, the hotel remains open to the public and offers unparalleled accommodations alongside renowned dining and drink options. And perhaps it's these very accommodations that have resulted over the years in local legends claiming many guests who check into the Gadsden never truly check out, as a number of stories boast the whole of the property is haunted by countless spirits of the past. And both staff and visitors to its bounds have reported doors that open and close on their own, instances of personal electronics going haywire or dying even on full charges, and tales of run-ins with shadowy manifestations, or with various full-bodied apparitions in clothing spanning the eras. Investigations of the building have yielded high EMF levels, chilling EVPs, and hits on communicative devices such as spirit boxes, while others have told of the sensation of someone unseen passing by them, or of being tapped on the shoulder and turning to find no one there. A rather famous Gadsden fable tells that its most haunted room is that of room 333, and those who have stayed within have reported phantom knocking heard in the middle of the night, a disturbing thumping and laughing sound from darkened corners, and accounts of the television, of the faucets, or of the radiator turning on and off inexplicably, activity that's become so intense it's actually caused several guests to vacate the room entirely, or to request another. And on to number 2, which has us exploring the center of Arizona and braving the ever-scenic and popular Bell Trail. The Bell Trail, which is located in Coconino National Forest around Sedona, Arizona, is a 7-mile pathway cutting through some of the most beautiful forest in the state that skirts the ever-popular Wet Beaver Creek Canyon, and its length has long been associated with ghost stories and tales of paranormal activity. Historically, lands now holding Coconino were, for thousands of years, frequented by tribes native to the area, which, being such a large expanse, included a multitude, such as the Hopi, Sinagua, Navajo, Havasupai, Hualapai, Pai, Paiutes, and Apache. Much later, beginning in the 1500s, the region would be colonized and ruled by Spain and later Mexico, up until 1848 when, through treaty with Mexico, the US would acquire territories comprising Arizona and New Mexico, after which lands would be opened up to the public domain and would become available for purchase, settlement, and for use. In 1898, President William McKinley would establish what he called the San Francisco Mountain Forest Reserve, upon request of U.S. Division of Forestry leader Gifford Pinchot. Unfortunately, this establishment would cause unrest amongst the local populace who claimed the creation of this reserve took up way too much land, resulting in riots, mass protests, and one Williams News editorial that claimed the project would virtually destroy Coconino County. In 1905, the forest reserves were transferred to the Department of Agriculture, after which the massive claims were to be managed by the newly established Forest Service. And a few years later, in 1908, Coconino National Forest was officially created under President Theodore Roosevelt through a merger of the San Francisco Mountains Reserve with the Tonto, Black Mesa, Grand Canyon, and several other surrounding wilderness areas. Beginning in 1932 and lasting nearly a decade, Coconino would welcome the addition of various shelters, trails, picnic and camping areas, and more, as, like many other parks and forests of the era, the Civilian Conservation Corps would set to work on its bounds to slowly form the parklands we know today. In the present, Coconino remains a popular destination for hikers, nature enthusiasts, anglers, horseback riders, hunters, and more, and offers a range of recreational opportunities suited for a wide assortment of interests. Of its many trails, perhaps none is more popular than that of the aforementioned Bell Trail, which skirts Wet Beaver Creek, and lush green terrain that is somewhat a rarity in the normal desert biome of Arizona. Disturbingly, and seemingly every year, those who have walked the Bell Trail have come back with spine-tingling stories, ranging from encounters with monsters to close calls with various specters, and both officials and hikers along the route have reported instances of personal effects that go missing, and that turn up later further on down the trail, disembodied voices and footsteps heard circling through the brush, and run-ins with various full-bodied apparitions in clothing spanning from ancient native attire up through more modern garments. Like a number of waterways through Mexico and the American Southwest, Wet Beaver Creek is tied to a range of tales, and those who walk it report otherworldly creatures emerging from the flow after dark, screams and splashing sounds that emanate from the current without source, and sightings of a woman in white, possibly La Llorona, that drifts eerily along the banks, and that's been known to shriek at or even chase those who get too close. Number 3 takes us just to the northwest of Phoenix to the legendary Saro Ranch. The Saro Ranch, which is situated in Glendale, Arizona, is a fully restored historic homestead boasting a number of educational artifacts and events, as well as lands rich for fig orchards, vineyards, and alfalfa fields, that draws in countless visitors each year, and that totes a rather ominous reputation as one of the state's most haunted places. Historically, following the 1885 creation of the Arizona Canal, wealthy Illinois investor William Henry Bartlett would see promise in lands just to the west of present-day Phoenix, and over the next year or so would acquire around 640 acres for the purpose of development and namely agriculture. In 1887, the ranch's first house was constructed for its new superintendent, Stephen Campbell. In 1891, a fruit packing house was added. In 1895, the site's main house was finished for the expanse's second superintendent, being Harry Adams. In 1898, the Bartlett's son Willie was diagnosed with TB, resulting in the family moving to Arizona permanently and in the construction of what they called a guest house. And finally, in 1900, a foreman's house was established and was utilized by ranch hands and workers as a sleeping quarters and for office space. Following the turn of the century, in 1913, one Peter E. Bradshaw would purchase the ranch, and by 1915 would transform its main crop into cotton. In 1927, Richard W. Smith would acquire the site, and would plant large citrus and pecan orchards, after which he would also construct a dairy barn. And following Richard's passing in 1944, his son Richard S. Smith would inherit the farm, and would shift its focus to dairy production alone. Beginning through the 1960s, parts of the ranch were sold off slowly, including for the purpose of the establishment of Glendale Community College. In 1966, the city of Glendale would begin an acquisition of around 80 acres of original ranch lands, and on March 7th of 1980, the site would be honored on the National Register of Historic Places, after which it would be opened up to the public as an educational and historic venue. Sadly, in 2017, Saguaro would weather a devastating fire, resulting in the destruction of its old blacksmith shop, granary building, and milk house. And though it would close for a time, in 2022, it was reopened and remains as such to this day. But it's not all fun and games at Saguaro, and over its lengthy existence, many who have visited the ranch have reported a range of chilling, otherworldly activity, including doors that open and close on their own, extreme cold patches felt in adverse weather, and instances of tools or old machinery that have been dormant for years suddenly coming to life and operating inexplicably. Informal investigations of the ranch have yielded strange EMF fluctuations and orbs captured in photography and video, while others have told of hearing disembodied voices, phantom footsteps, and of smelling perfume, cologne, or tobacco smoke without source. By far the most famous ghost stories surrounding Saguaro involve two commonly cited entities. The first is that of an unidentified man encountered wandering ranch grounds, that some believe to be either a superintendent or William Henry Bartlett himself. The ranch's second famous apparition is that of the Lady of Saguaro, a ghostly gal who manifests in a flowing white dress, and who's been known to dart through rooms or across open spaces quickly before disappearing around corners. Okay, and on to number 4, which has us exploring a rather famous and infamous natural landmark being the Superstition Mountains. The Superstition Mountains, which are placed right out of Apache Junction in Arizona, are a breathtaking range of peaks that have grown in popularity amongst hikers, photographers, nature enthusiasts, and historians, whose bounds, true to their namesake, are shrouded in a number of local legends and tales of encounters with the otherworldly. Historically, experts today believe this prominent mountain range was formed around 18 million years ago by volcanic activity, and that their peaks were once part of a massive caldera which resurged to form the mountains we are now so familiar with. Much later, through human history and for thousands of years, tribes native to the area would frequent the mountain range and would use it as a landmark, as a defensive feature, and as a hunting grounds. More specifically, the White Mountain Apaches and Pima, both of whom lived nearby, would grow to respect the range and would revere it as a place of great spiritual power. Later still, through the 16th century, early Spanish expeditions through what is now Arizona would document the formidable peaks, and would refer to them as Sierra de la Espuma, or in English, the Foam Mountain. And over subsequent centuries, and by various parties, they would also be called the Crooked Top Mountains and Thunder Mountain. It was through the 1860s, however, when the formation would earn its current moniker, after settlers began describing remaining native tribes as superstitious regarding the expanse, resulting in them officially being christened as the Superstition Mountains. Little did they know, however, the mountains would more than earn their title, as through the 1800s they would play host to one of our country's most famous legends, being that of the Lost Dutchman's gold mine. Now, as it's told, through this era, a German miner by the name of Jacob Waltz would take up a job with the renowned Vulture Mine, and over time would begin embarking on long explorations of the surrounding area, particularly near the mountains. Eventually, however, Waltz would return to town following one such adventure with a sizable quantity of gold, and day by day, it seemed he found increasing quantities. As legend has it, on several occasions, Waltz would mention his finding of a secret mine bearing a motherlode of gold, and though many would attempt to find the location by either following him out or getting him drunk at local saloons, the Dutchman never revealed the strike's location. In 1891, Jacob would pass on, and it's claimed that on his deathbed, he actually revealed the location of his fabled mine to boarding house keeper Julia Thomas, who also took it to the grave. Over the years, a number of mines were discovered through the area, and though some claim their findings as the fabled Lost Dutchman's gold mine, none of these sites seem to bear the amount of gold that Jacob had retrieved during his lifetime. While this all makes for a good story, it's now speculated that Jacob was actually, in reality, just stealing gold from the Vulture Mine, and that his lost mine was simply a good excuse to keep interested parties from asking too many questions. In the present, the Superstition Mountains remain open to the public, and have grown into a rather cherished recreation area, offering a mess of trails, landmarks, scenic viewpoints, and much, much more. Chillingly, stories surrounding this prestigious range aren't a new phenomenon, and before European settlement, tribes held a number of tales tied to the region, ranging from skinwalker and other cryptid encounters, to powerful nature spirits capable of controlling or even killing those who got too close. Easily the most famous Apache legend tells that somewhere deep within the mountains, there's a hole that leads down to the lower world, or as some might call it, hell. It's claimed that from this hole, evil beings are known to emerge after dark, and have actually been responsible for pulling countless victims to their dooms, while others tell that strong winds and storms are commonly thrown from the pit and into our world, resulting in fires and disastrous dust storms through nearby cities. All along the mountain's various trails, many have reported disembodied voices or chanting heard on the winds. Extreme cold spots felt through the normally hellish Arizona heat, and encounters with shadowy figures that stalk the living. And a handful of investigations have yielded high EMF levels, EVPs captured in photography and video, and orbs of light spied flitting across the skies. Additionally, some have stumbled across sites they believe to be cult shrines or ritual circles, and it's claimed that satanic worshippers may frequent the area, calling upon the ancient expanse's power to perform dangerous and dark magic ceremonies. Lastly, some tell the Lost Dutchman's mine still remains hidden amongst the hills, and that the reason it's never been found may be due to a curse or some form of magic. Incidentally, it's said a good number of self-proclaimed treasure hunters have gone looking for the mine and have mysteriously vanished, and some warned that the pursuit of its riches might yield lethal consequences. Saving the best for last, for number 5, we'll be taking a look at the ancient ruins of Watapi. The Watapi National Monument, which is located in Coconino County in Arizona, is a renowned archaeological site holding the remnants of ancient civilization. Its weathered grounds have long been surrounded by a slew of age-old legends and tales of the supernatural. Historically, habitation of the Watapi region dates back to an astounding 8,000 to 11,000 years ago, as discovered by various spears and artifacts uncovered by archaeologists today. Around 4,000 years ago, people across the expanse were living in small open-air pit house villages complete with irrigation canals, and would actually begin domesticating dogs. And over the millennia, up through around 500 CE, nomadic tribes would hunt antelope, jackrabbits, and other game across the area. Notably, circa 500 CE, and due in part to new technologies including bow and arrow, pottery, and various tools, native tribes would adopt much larger houses, and sites such as Watapi's amphitheater were established. Between 700 and 900 CE, the Pueblo people would begin construction of above-ground rooms, and following this period, existing structures were updated to multi-story masonry constructs that could stretch several stories in height. But the Pueblo of Watapi wouldn't see true growth until the Sunset Crater Explosion, which is believed to have transpired through the last quarter of the 11th century. Notably, while the immediate result of this explosion was people evacuating the area, at the same time, it would also draw in new settlers, and the ash it threw across the landscape would actually fortify soil, allowing for it to retain water and for massive agricultural development. It was during this very period that the Pueblo of Watapi would evolve into what we know today, courtesy of the Kohonina, Sinagua, and Kayenta people, who, through the centuries, would live and farm side by side. Circa 1300 AD, people began moving away from Watapi, after which it would remain vacant for a time, before, centuries later, it was inhabited by the Navajo, who would reside on site until 1864 when the US Army forced them out and onto what is recognized now as the Long Walk, a 500-mile journey to Fort Sumner, or the Bosque Redondo, which was known to the Navajo as the land of suffering. While in 1868, for a time following the release from Fort Sumner, Navajo would return to Wapatki, tensions would flare amidst their people and Anglo ranchers over resources and water, and this eventually led to the use of taxation and intimidation tactics to push the tribe from the area. In 1902, Navajo Peshlikai Etsidi would travel to Washington, D.C., where he would meet with President Theodore Roosevelt and raise awareness over the mistreatment of his people. Incidentally, an allotment program was set up for remaining Navajo and their grazing rights through the region. Later, in 1924, Wapatki National Monument was formally established in an effort to preserve the historic city, which would be maintained under the Forest Service, and rather amicably, Clyde Peshlikai, who was Etsidi's son, would actually act as custodian through the 1930s. In 1937, several expansions would result in 4 large Navajo residential use areas falling under the jurisdiction of the National Park Service, and native tribes would continue to use the land through the late 1950s and early 60s. However, by 1964, most sought residency elsewhere, and eventually, only the Peshlikai family remained. Sadly, the final special use permit in existence allotted to the tribes rests in the hands of Clyde's daughter, and upon her death, her lands will be acquired by the National Park Service. In the present, the Wapatki National Monument remains open to the public and is a place of strong spiritual reverence to native tribes who consider its use a birthright. The expanse offers a range of ruins and structures that are so ridiculously old it's actually mind-boggling, and it continues to offer a glimpse into what life was like for the Pueblo people through a history that is often forgotten or simply omitted from our Americanized schooling system. As one of the oldest sites in America, it's no surprise that Wapatki is surrounded by a wealth of ancient legends and tales of the unknown, and many claim that if one visits the site anywhere from nightfall to early mornings, they may just catch a glimpse from the beyond. Over the years, both officials and visitors to the site have reported extreme cold patches, strange fogs that descend upon the area alone and on otherwise clear days, and encounters with a range of apparitions in clothing spanning back to nearly unrecognizable and positively ancient attire. Investigations of the expanse have yielded odd EMF fluctuations, EVPs containing forgotten languages, and hits on both thermal grids and spirit boxes, while others have detailed instances of approaching the site at night to find a spectral version of itself still standing, with lights in windows, fires lit, and figures moving through various rooms and constructs. Chillingly, several who have visited Wapatki after dark have told of the strong feeling that someone or something unseen is stalking them from the ruins, watching their every step. And several more terrifying accounts tell of the sighting of hominid monstrosities that almost resemble Wendigo, along with other behemoths from native lore. While the Pueblo acts as a center point, the Wapatki National Monument stretches out into the desert, and those who have wandered these sands have told of coming across ritual sites or cult meetings. Chillingly, some believe that through their practices, these gatherings have opened various doorways into the very fabric of reality, and several more disturbing fables tell of hikers who have encountered or have even been attacked by what they feel are demonic presences, and who have returned to civilization bearing wounds such as bruises, scratches, or in extreme cases, even broken bones. Lastly, various accounts from those who have braved the old Pueblo detail sighting UFOs in the skies above, encounters with extraterrestrials on the ground, and instances in which the desert seems to change before their very eyes, as if it's trying to get them lost, or even keep them. Thanks for joining me on this adventure through some of the most haunted places in Arizona. If you enjoyed hearing my histories and ghost stories, subscribe to my channel, throw this upload a like, and share me with anyone you feel could use a good scare. Until next time.